Good morning. Welcome to our very first January 2022 representing people with color. And today I am excited, yes, to once again continue on this journey of color with you and of our approach required this season. And just to continue with introducing myself once again, I'm Rabia Elisa, and I'm just inspired to continue to motivate and to continue to really speak up for what is required and for where we find ourselves in this generation and in this era, and to just include and not exclude is priority this season. And therefore, with me starting off the season, I thought, you know what? It's better to start off with what is required now, with the challenges that we have been through in 2021. We really have to approach things in a different way. We really have to ensure that what we do, we don't only focus on where we were and what we went through, but we really go continue with that approach of making sure that we are headed towards a generation that understands our importance of protecting and respecting one another. So my discussion this morning with our color factor, with our approach this season, with representing color, is why is it important to understand what it is that we educate out there, what it is that we speak up for, and what it is that we really represent. And this morning, my emphasis with representing is I really want to take us on a journey of understanding why we cannot exclude and why we have to educate better, why it is important for us to educate trains and to educate a better trains, right? Because we went through a lot, we have been challenged a lot in our season, but we need to understand why we were challenged. We need to understand why we need to move forward with that mindset of accepting one another, with that mindset of respecting one another, and with that mindset of continuing stronger with understanding that we have to include and accept unique. So our uniqueness this season is I really want to talk about things that we were challenged with years ago, because what we were challenged with years ago is influencing and impacting this generation. But our question is not how it influences us. Our question today is how do we step forward with what we went through and with knowing that in this season we are required to be the generation of now. We are not required to be the generation of 1994, of 1993. We are required to be the generation of 2022. And how we educate that is where we will find ourselves in this era. And therefore, my emphasis this season is on our social pages, is on how we educate on our television screens, is on how we educate when we represent, is on how we educate when we are in our schools, when we implement in our parliamency the changes that is required for generation now and for generation to be. Because the requirement is not now to go back and find solutions in 1992 that is going to help us. The requirement now is to find us in 2022, to find who this generation is. And once we know who our generation is, we would be able to prosper. We will be able to progress. We would be able to move forward. We would be able to step out better, knowing that when I'm out there, I represent not only myself, I represent not what happened in 1994, I represent not apartheid, but I represent generation of 2022. And that is what is required. The change that we want to see in our communities, in our school programs, in our parliamencies, with what is challenging global nations in this era is not what happened in 1992, but it is generation 22 that has to react and that has to approach things in a different way, with a different mindset and with understanding who they are, where they are, how to step forward, and how to be the better them with doing what is required now. That's our approach today. And I'm going to start off strong with saying that I'm really going to have to start off with how do we educate? What is it that we educate when we really allow ourselves to really speak up? And when we really allow others to really see what it is that we are speaking up about. So this morning, it is not what you are saying, but it is what are you educating? Because many of us during the season are voicing our opinions. Many of us during the season are voicing what it is that we require. Many of us during the season are voicing what it is that is challenging our nations. But what is it that I represent is required? And therefore, when I start off today, I want to really focus on what I've seen on social media. I want to really focus on the barrier, the boundary out there. And I want to really focus on us making sure that we don't go wrong with moving back, but that we move where we are required to move, that we as a generation are headed where we are required to be headed. So generation 2022, generation now, are really required to forget apartheid, to forget white and black, to forget what we have ever been educated, but to stand our ground with saying we accept the unique, we accept different color, we accept people with disability, we accept people with impairment, we accept people who finds themselves challenged in a religious way, we accept people who goes through women abuse, we accept people who lives in poverty, we accept and we do not exclude. We have a process of accepting and voicing for what is required. And therefore, when we stand our ground, when we speak up about color differences, when we speak up about what we are being challenged with, it is important that we know how we speak up. It is important that we know what is it that we say, that we don't go and say and don't go back to where things went wrong, but that we understand we are here to stand for stronger and to stand for better. And when we do that, we influence on our social pages, on our television screens, and in our communities, in our community projects, we include every person with every difference, no matter your color, no matter your challenge, no matter if you are disabled. We prioritize making space for everyone. We prioritize that the platform is for everyone. We prioritize that we understand the difference between black and white. We understand what was educated when we speak about black and when we speak about white. Therefore, we're not gonna educate speaking about black and white, but we're gonna educate speaking of generation now. We are gonna educate speaking of a generation of change, of a generation that does not see color, but of a generation that sees the difference in what it is that we do. Because when I educate black, this is what is visible. This is what I see. This is what I educate. And this is what other people would view when you educate. This is what a child would view when you educate them on what black is. When you educate someone and this is white, this is what someone will see when they see white. And when you speak of white, this is the difference that we need to understand. What is it that we educate when we speak about black and about white? Why it is important to educate about generation now? Because when we include and not exclude, we would understand that when we look through our vocabularies and we see what are being educated concerning black, when you educate people on what something that is called black is, people see it normally as darkness, they see it normally as bad, they see it normally as at the bottom. So you educate apartheid, and therefore in 2022 we don't speak about black anymore. anymore. We don't speak about white anymore, but we speak about the South African person. We speak about the young person of today. We speak about the woman of today. We speak about the woman of chains. We speak about the woman of unique, the person of unique. When we educate people concerning white during any season, what do we educate? We educate apartheid. We educate that this color is better than this color. And therefore, when you speak about people, when you speak about humanity, you don't speak about black and white, because when a child are being educated and in school, they are being educated that this is black and this is white. What are the colors that you would normally use? And then children would choose white, right? Because it's light and it looks better, right? But what do we educate when we speak about a person, a human being black and a human being white? That's people of color today. That is why I want to emphasize today that we have to educate right. We have to get it right now. We have to not wait until tomorrow to try and stop something that is creating hatred, that is creating bullying, that is creating harassment in schools, that is creating apartheid. But we have to allow ourselves to be better. And we can only allow ourselves to be better if we realize that we are speaking wrong, if we realize that we are educating wrong, and if we realize that we are not educating our children to accept one another, but we are educating our children to now exclude, because we teach them and we educate them that black lives matter, that this is a white person. You don't educate wrong. You educate to prosper. You don't educate to bully and harass someone else, because when children go to school, they are being exposed to a lot. They are being exposed to difference, and we need to educate them. What is the difference? What is required? What is humanity? What is the different nationalities? In order for them, when they learn about colors, they would know, I'm not going to speak about someone being black, and then I'm also going to educate that black is darkness and that light is better. It's better to live in light. When you go to churches, pastors, preachers, it's better to live in the light. It's better to have the light shine. It's better to have the light there. But when you go to the schools, the teachers are educating that black is the black color and that we use color. And when you go into the classrooms today, you see the classroom is full of different colors. You see the different colors out there. So yes, we need to get it right on the ground floor. We need to get the foundations right in order to know where we are, and in order to not go and to break a generation down that is already so much broken, that has already been through so much, and that is just finding their way in life. We need to educate our generation to really break free of those barriers, of those wrong ways of speaking, and to really allow ourselves to prosper with making sure that when we educate, when we set the foundations, when we're speaking up for humanity, we speak up for one nation, we speak up for one requirement, and we all do that with one voice of respecting and protecting one another. Because when you educate protection, and when you educate respect, people would respect you and people would protect you. But when you educate our young children to go out and bully one another with this is the color and this is the different things, and when people switch the television on and they see the challenges that our people go through, they go into schools and they also put people through challenges, and they also limit people because of what they are being educated. So our color approach to this season is, let's get it right. Let's get it right in the beginning rather than breaking and continuing to break, if we have the opportunity to build and to protect and to respect. And therefore, I want to really have us focus on representing and leading nations, because this is where we have challenges today. This is where parliaments has had to step up and had to intervene when it comes to our education on our social pages, when it comes to our education on our television screens. We give our parliamency the opportunity in this season to accept change that is required. Because if our leaders accept that there's change required, they would accept and make space to create that change that is required. And therefore, when we represent, we do not exclude, we do not bully, we do not send hatred, but we accept what respecting and what protecting for what is right. And then also to really continue that the challenges that we had in 2020 is really things that was really trying, we were trying. When I look at the challenge of this whole virus season, right, of this whole generation of change that is happening and that has taken place, I really see that there was a requirement for something to get right. There was a requirement for a generation to get in order. There was a requirement for a generation that were losing themselves in a busy world. And when this virus hit nations, it was really something that had to grab our attention and say, you know what? There's something about humanity that y'all think is right, but is not right. And really, I have to say that it has been challenging for every one of us, but it has also revealed and opened our eyes for a lot of things and a lot of ways that we were conforming with, that we had to get right, and that we some way in life and sometime in life we're gonna have to get it right. And therefore, I always say that your challenge is a challenge, but it is an opportunity for you to get something right in your life, to get something right with what it is that you are doing, to get something right with fighting for something that would have you prosper and that would not limit or break or bring a barrier with where you are at. And that is why our challenges really was an opportunity for us to get something right. And I would really have to say that because sometimes life speaks to us in a certain way, but we're gonna have to allow ourselves to understand what it is that we are having to get right in order to not break ourselves down, in order to not put ourselves down. We are gonna have to understand that yes, life speaks to us sometimes in a harsh way, but we have to be educated in a harsh way in order to get right what is required in our lives. And therefore, the challenges that we had is challenges that brought our attention towards getting something right, towards prospering, towards protection, towards respecting. Because before everything, we had challenges of woman abuse. We had challenges in our community of poverty. We had challenges in our community of finding ourselves amongst hatred. We had challenges in our community of finding ourselves amongst a community that excluded. And we have to understand what is it that is happening around us and what is it that we have to get right in order to not continue in a generation that are being broken down, but in order to continue in a generation that are prospering. And therefore representing and leading in 2022 is getting your foundation right that is required at this moment with everything that we do. We all need to understand that yes, there's a lot happening and yes, there's a lot required of us, but we need to understand that our foundation our foundation has been broken, and we need to get the foundation right in order to stand firm. Because if we get the foundation right, then we would be immovable. Amen. We would be unchangeable. We would be unstoppable because we stand on a firm foundation. And you know, a foundation is one foundation. A foundation is not excluding between white and black. A foundation is not excluding between someone who's disabled and someone who has got all of their body elements right. A foundation is firm and is a firm ground for everyone to continue stronger. And in order for us to get our color approach right, we need to get our approach of keeping barriers outside, keeping boundaries outside, and allowing ourselves to prosper with saying that this platform is not excluding, this platform is not differentiating, this platform is not abusive, this platform is not manipulative, but this platform allows the space for everyone to represent, to appear with being there where they are required, with what they are required. And therefore, in this year, we prioritize not judging what happened, but the now factor of what is required. And I just want to really speak about not judging what happened, but understand the now factor. And when I want to focus on that, I want us to really understand why it is important to not hold on to what happened. Because when you hold on to what happened, you hold on to all of the hatreds around what happened. You hold on to all of the abuses around what happened. You hold on to all of the limitations around what happened. Then you hold on to all of the hatred. You hold on to exclusion. You hold on to people that could not accept a difference. You hold on to people that could not accept themselves. And why you cannot hold on to those things in 2022 is important. Why you have to allow yourself to be present in the now factor with leaving what happened and prospering with that forgiveness mindset of accepting that is ready to allow you to prosper. You cannot hold on to judgment concerning someone else, concerning something that you do not have control over. But what you have control over is to prosper with where you are in life now. You have the opportunity to prosper, and that is why we prioritize in 2022 not what happened in 2021, but what is required in 2022. We don't hold on to hatred of what happened to us in 2021. We don't hold on to the bullying. We don't hold on to the jealousy. We don't hold on to the abuse that we went through, but we hold on to us being stronger, with prospering, with allowing ourselves to be better, with allowing ourselves to respect what happened and to understand that I am required to prosper. I'm not required to go back in what happened in 1992 to what happened in 2022, but I'm required to prosper with where I'm at in this era. And that is why we prioritize to not judge. We prioritize to not go on and speak concerning those things that were breaking us down. We prioritize the now factor of saying that this is where I'm at. What I went through then, I went through, but this is where I'm at now, and I'm required to prioritize me being better. I'm required to prioritize me prospering, and I'm required to prioritize me living with that mindset of respecting me, of respecting my environment, of protecting myself, and of protecting where I am headed. And therefore, our approaches on social media, our approaches on how we educate our generation now, and what seems right and what is right is important. How we approach what used to seem right to us and what we used to accept then, but what we are required to know is right now and are required to accept now. And therefore, we prioritize not judging, but we prioritize prospering. You prioritize not judging what someone else have brought on you, but you prioritize prospering prospering, with forgiving them, with respecting what happened, but with moving forward the stronger and the better you. Because you cannot keep control of what happened. You have to let it go, and you have to move forward in understanding that life goes on, life continues, and in order for me to continue, I would have to continue with what life requires of me today. Life does not require of me to hold on to 2021, to hold on to 1994, to hold on to generations of apartheid, but life requires of me to accept that in 2022, our color approach is to accept and respect and protect one another. Whatever requires to be dealt with would be dealt with in accordance with what is required. But for me in this era is to not go and fight battles of what I don't know what happened, what I don't know what went wrong, what I don't know where it started. But in order for me to continue in 2022 is to understand that life requires me to be on board with where life is at in this generation. And this generation is ready to prosper, but we all need to be ready to prosper with this generation, allowing ourselves to forgive and allowing ourselves to respect and allowing ourselves to protect and to be better with where we are. Our approach with inclusion and with forgiveness is we educate a generation of freedom. We educate a generation of change. We educate a generation that is ready to prosper. We educate a generation that is ready to respect themselves, a generation that is ready to protect themselves. We educate a generation of color, and the generation of color is a generation of difference, is a generation with a unique approach of forgiveness, of wellness, of prosperity. And that is our number one approach with inclusion. Our number one approach with prospering is educate a generation of freedom, educate a generation of betterness, educate a generation of wellness, educate a generation of color, a generation that forgives, that respects, and that protects one another, and that protects where they are at. That is generation now. That is our number one approach with inclusion. Our second approach with inclusion is to really add more into what is required in our communities, right? Because when we are challenged, we find that our communities are really the people on the ground level that goes through these challenges. We understand that our communities are really the people on ground level that can really bring the change. We understand that our communities is really where the change is really going to be effective and going to be efficient, because that is where the change is required. And therefore, our approach number two is we add more into what is required in our communities. Yes, communities goes through a lot, but there's a strength that goes when we talk about a community of people. And I just want to talk about a community of people. But to really continue on really discussing a community of people, I want us to understand what a community of people is. And I'm going to really continue with that just now, because I feel that it is important for us to understand a community rather than talking about a nation or black and white, but what is a community of people when it comes to color in this generation. A community of people is a community of trains. A community of people is people that doesn't talk about black or white, but people that talks about a generation. People that talks about an era of people. People that talks about nations. People that does not talk about this religion or that religion. A community of people is people that does not exclude anyone, but a community of people who nurtures and who take care of one another. A community of people are people who have empathy for someone else's problem, are people who are 100% loyal to what someone else experienced. And in 2022, we are required to have a community of people available that represents people of color. We are not required to have a religious group of people. We are not required to have a certain color group of people, but we are required to speak of a generation now. We are required to speak about the global nation, the international nation. We are required to speak about humanity. So when we educate on our television programs, we don't educate a church group, we don't educate a religious group, we don't exclude anyone, but we educate that we as humanity is a community of people. And when I speak about a community, I really want to emphasize on growing up and understanding that my mother, our parenting, really those years were a community that parented us. We really were parented with a nurturing community factor and with a nurturing community approach, because the auntie next door knew that I'm Anna's daughter and that I would have to be fine. If Anna was in a daily job, Anna would be fine in a daily job, because Anna knew that there's a community that takes care of my daughter, of my children, when I'm in my daily job. And that is the community that is required in this era, that is required in this season. We are not required to look at you as a person from South Africa, as a person who's being called a black person or a white person. We are required to understand that you are a fellow human being, that you are a fellow person, and that we don't need anyone to exclude on you, but we are ready to accept and protect you with where you are in your international country. And today we find people in different countries that are going through different challenges, but then the doors are closed because we are a religious community that only focuses on ourselves. Today we find ourselves with people that are being challenged in their daily jobs because of exclusion of color, because of exclusion of how we are being educated. But we seems to have to understand that our color approach is to accept that we are a community, that humanity is a community of people. Humanity is not people of a different tradition, of a different religion, people that comes from South Africa, people that comes from Nigeria, but humanity needs to understand that we are a community of people. And when I look at you, I'm not going to look at you as someone from Nigeria, but I'm going to look at you as someone that is a fellow human being now living in my community. A community of people is when I look at someone, I don't look at your color, I don't look at where you come from, but I understand that you are a human being on earth that is now living in my community of respect and of protection. So therefore, the values that we have been educated in our years when we were young, when our parents used to educate the community to look after one another and to protect one another, are those values that we should continue to stand firm with, in saying that as a community in South Africa, we as a community continue to require respect in our community, and we as a community are continuing to be having care and empathy for someone else and for other nationalities that now has entered our community, because we don't want hatred happening, we don't want abuse happening, We don't want bullying amongst our children. So whoever enters our community needs to understand that our foundation is a foundation that we respect one another, we respect where we are at, and we protect one another. We respect the atmosphere, we respect nature, we respect our community's boundaries of protection, and we therefore requires everyone who enters our community to accept that, yeah, we accept you and we require you to accept us and to not break us down or to not bully us or to not hate on our children, but to accept us for being fellow human beings that has also been allowed to be here. And therefore, when we educate to accept people better in our communities, our children would be more respected. We won't find problems like woman abuse. We won't find problems like hatred, because we accept and we include and we do not exclude. And therefore, if we want to see things better in our communities, if we want to see our communities prosper, if we want to see everyone in our communities being fine, we need to educate that this is our community's ground rules. This is our foundations of respect that we require in our communities. And whether you came from a different national country, whether you came from a different religion, we accept and respect you, and we require you to respect that this is our boundaries of our community. You only get respect when you speak up and when you educate that I respect you, and therefore I also require you to respect me. And that is our number two approach with inclusion and not excluding. And then, just to have another sip of water before I continue with approach number three, that is, how do we really continue with helping one another in our communities? Especially when we know that in our communities we have an opportunity to educate, right, and to educate what we require. We don't necessarily have to hate on someone else who now entered the community. They now on new grounds and they don't understand where they are. They don't understand what is required, but they also require to be, they are also required to be there. And therefore we're not gonna hate on them because they are there now, but how do we continue to protect them and to protect ourselves? And therefore, in this, we need to really communicate on our empathy factor, on our care factor. When we see one another in the streets and we are different nationalities, we are different colors, there is no problem with greeting the different person. There's no problem with you saying good day, how are you? There is no problem with you greeting someone else. That is all that is required. We don't need you to go and grab a conversation and to go and invite these people into your homes, but they are in your community now, and all we require of you is to respect them for also being there, right? To respect them and to show them respect, and they would show respect towards you and towards your community. So our approach number three is to educate empathy, to educate that we really care for everyone, to not only educate empathy when we are on our church grounds, but to continue to educate empathy, because that is naturally who we are, right? We are naturally people who cares, and people who cares educates to include, pardon, and not to exclude. And therefore, when we educate on these things, we get our inclusion factors right by not excluding anyone, by not creating something that you don't want to see in your community, but with expecting someone else, but with respecting someone else and protecting someone else with where they are at, because they are there. And it's gonna take some time if you want to now say that, you know what, I don't want these people in my community. It will create more chaos, because you will create and stir anger, and you will create and stir bullying, and you will create and stir hatred. And we don't want that to continue in our communities, because we went through those things and we are trying to prosper. And in order for us to prosper in our communities is to include and to accept that we are here, but how do we move forward better? And therefore, in order to come to our leadership when we represent, we really need to understand and to know what it means to lead and to represent. A representative, I've mentioned before, is not someone who is really on the platform only on a television screen, but a representative is someone who can lead with that mindset of seeing what is required and effectively doing what is required. That mindset of seeing there's change required in our nation or in our generation and leading with that mindset of change. An effective leader is a leader who would not want to get their ways of leading, be educated from their team, but to understand in order to lead this team, I need to implement my strengths of what is required in this role, what is required in my generation, what is it that my nation requires. I am not required to go and listen to my parliamentary people who's gonna say that this is what we need and this is what we need and this is what we need. I'm gonna have to make sure that I independently lead with my independent way of seeing things and my independent way of making that change. A change can only be effective if the trains are really with that independent decision making priority, where you make the decision knowing what is required, understanding that I have been employed in this leadership role, but I cannot lead on what others requires me to do, because that is not why I've been employed in this role. I am employed because I need to lead with my independent decision making style that can only lead with making sure that we prosper. We can only prosper when we really allow ourselves to independently lead. When we see what's required in our community, when I see that I've been employed in this position, I've been employed in this role, I'm required to lead in this country, but I cannot lead based on what people tells me to do. I cannot lead based on what people tells me that they need. I need to go out and see what is really required, and then independently I have to decide to make that change and how to make that change. And that is priority in the season. That is where we need our leaders to be at in the season. We don't need our international leaders to now go and say that in Africa we need to do what the United States of America is doing. I don't need leaders to say that in Africa we need to now do what the Europeans are doing. I need the leaders to say that Africa is a country where there is much land, there is much foundation for us to grow and to better ourselves with what we have. We need to educate our young people in our communities in Africa to really go out and represent in Africa as being leaders. We don't need our young people to fly to America and to fly to Europe in order to go and lead nations. We need our young people to lead from Africa. We need our young people to lead from where they were grounded, from their foundation, where they've been educated from. And we need our young people to invest in those countries, to see the trends in those countries. We need people who's from Syria and they may be living in another side of the world to see what's required in Syria and to act from there and to say that I need to represent and lead being a Syrian, being a person who sees the poverty or the war that my country is in, and to really be able to advocate and to represent for what is required. Because yes, we come to international countries, but we don't come here to stay here and to focus on our households. We come to international countries to prosper our nations in order to know this is where I'm coming from. I see what's required in my country and now I need to invest and implement in my country. And that's where we need our people to be. We don't need our people to now go and live the new American lifestyle and to forget when they see the challenge in Africa, to forget where they were born at. But we need them to fly to Africa to come and implement change. We need them to fly to Syria to come and implement change. We need them to fly to Pakistan to come and implement change. We need our people who have now been educated internationally, who have now seen what's required in their communities that they were brought up, and who has now had the opportunity to see difference in international countries, to now go back and to now invest and implement their change in their communities. And that is generation of color. That is generation that include and not exclude. You don't exclude because you're now living in a different side of the world. You're now living in a different country. You see the poverty that your nation is in, but you have the opportunity to travel to that international country, to go back and invest in your country, to go back and invest in your nation, to go back and invest in your community, to go back and invest and make sure that we prosper, because you have been blessed to allow your community to prosper, and therefore you allow your community to prosper by allowing them to prosper with you. When you prosper to Europe, you allow your community of people to prosper with you to Europe. You go and invest, you go and implement in your community again. You don't forget about them because you're in Europe, but you go and include them with what you have learned in Europe, with the change that you see that you can implement in your community. Whether it is that you can financially be a difference, whether it is that you can set up projects in your community that will help educate your children in the community to be better, then you continue to do that. But you don't exclude yourself, you don't exclude your nation because you now see yourself as different, because you now see yourself as a celebrity, because you now see yourself as someone living in a different nation and in a different country, but you include your nation in you prospering. You continue to educate that we include when we prosper. When we prosper, we don't prosper on our own, but we include. And that is generation of color that is required in this era. Era 2022, I call us our generation of our unique voiced approach. We voice for what is required, we react on what is required, and uniquely we are the difference for what is required. That is our unique voiced approach. An approach for a better change, an approach to protect one another, an approach to stand firm for caring and for having empathy, with including and not excluding, with accepting difference and not bringing a barrier or not limiting one another. We not only educate, but we accept. We not only educate that I stand for change, that I stand for color, that I stand for people of difference, but I accept difference when I walk in my community. When I see what is required, I accept to be the difference. I don't only speak up for what is required, but I advocate for what is required, rather than only educating and not really ready to accept. We are very easy, ready to educate someone, but are we really ready to accept what is required? And sometimes when we want to see that unique operation, we have to educate ourselves to accept rather than wanting to reject. We have to educate ourselves to accept difference rather than wanting to reject. So when I see that I am required to be what I say I am, then I should be ready to be what I am that I say that I am. And therefore, when we educate a generation of change, we educate a generation that doesn't fear to accept someone else's differences, that doesn't fear to see when someone else are in a better state than them, but are ready to also prosper with learning what they are there to learn and to be educated for. And therefore, we continue to really include and not exclude. That is our portion of today. And that is our priority with where we are at with people of color. Really also to include on people of color. I know that I can continue speaking because I can, amen. But also to really include is that I'm not now only gonna voice for it, but how am I going to really educate it in an effective way? How am I really going to approach and react in that way that I say it is required that people should react in? And therefore, we have a few things that we really need to take into consideration when we say that we want to educate inclusion. And when I speak on educating inclusion, I really want to emphasize on a few ways that we can really educate better. And firstly, I want to say that our target market during the season, when we want to educate better, is we have the platform that we can educate the international nation, right? We have the platform that we can educate not only my community of people, but I now have the opportunity to educate the international person. I now have the opportunity to see that my person from Africa would tune in and listen to this video and then go out and implement the strains in their community. My person in Syria might be tuning into this video and they might be going to implement trains in their community. My person in Pakistan might be able to listen to this video and they would go out and implement in their community. My person in Europe might be able to see what is required and they might be able to go and educate in their community. So our platforms and these social pages is really an opportunity for us all to prosper. Is really an opportunity where we were all given the right to prosper. Is really an opportunity where they say we don't need your merits, we don't need your studio, we don't need your television setup, but we prosper with where we are at. So social media has really been that platform for us where we can really reach into nations that we were not able to reach into years before. And we are really now to able to speak up and to allow other young people who tunes into these videos to be motivated and to continue to also speak for what is right and to also see things in a different way. We really have the opportunity with social media to really bring our nation of the one voice approach to that platform foundation that is firm, that we all say we now have been educated to accept one another, and therefore we prosper not only as a country, we prosper not only as a nation, we prosper not only as a religious group, we prosper not only by color, but we prosper by educating with the one voice approach, with accepting one another, that we say humanity now prospers. We don't now say Africa prospers, we don't now say Europe prosper, we don't now say America prosper, but social media has been that opportunity for everyone to prosper, for everyone to see what is required, what can I do, what am I being educated, and what can I go and implement that is required with where I'm at. And therefore, I salute social media for that opportunity, because it is an opportunity that says you don't need a merit, you don't need a qualification, you don't need a certificate to go and voice for what is right. We don't need you to say that you need the parliamentary seat, because the parliamentary seat sometimes is not equal for everyone. We now need you to understand that social media is there. Go and invest, go and implement, go and represent, go and be the change that is required with where we are at as a generation of now. So therefore, our target market, when we really want to see and want to really invest in, is our social media. Where we want to see representatives of change, representatives that speaks for what is required and for what is right. And therefore, let us make use of this foundation that is now ready to be there for everyone, and everyone should be ready to respect what it is there for. Don't go on social media to go and abuse others. Don't go on social media to go and manipulate others. Don't go on social media to go and exclude, because the foundation of social media is now the foundation that is required with where we are at, with prospering as a generation, where we want to say we're not going to exclude anymore. We're not going to silence you down anymore. We're not going to go and limit you. We're not going to go and put you there as a person of Africa. We're not gonna go and put you there as a person with a different religion, but we now are there to listen to you as a fellow human being. We're not looking at where you come from. We're not looking at this color. We listen to you of what you have to say, with being a fellow human being, with being your voice in this season. And that is where we require our social media pages to really help our representatives out there today to say that we know what, we will 100% take hands with bettering generations, because we are standing with that one voice approach of protecting one another. And that is our main priority. And then also to say that, women in different countries now have an opportunity to tune in and to listen to someone that can inspire them, and maybe something that they are being challenged with in their countries. There's someone that cares for them that they might be able to reach out to when they are being challenged in an international country. So yes, social media is that platform of freedom for everyone, and we need to respect it and really make use of it the right way. And with social media, I also really want to say that we need in this season social media and our television networks to really take hands in what is required. And I'm just going to really speak on that, concerning where we require our prospering season for social media and for our television networks to take hands in this voiced approach of accepting, including, and not excluding. With saying that, on our television screens, we really need to really see that the way that we are being educated on television, we need our television networks to really invest in our social pages. We need our television pages, our television networks to work with social pages so that we educate our nation and our generation, with saying that we're not only speaking to people who tunes in and who does not really know about what is happening on social media, but we want to understand that our education factor is right, because it's easy for us to have these discussions on television, but then it does not reach your everyday individual, because your New Zealand television screen is different to your South African television screen, because your European television screen is different to your United States of America television screen. So we really want to implement what we see happening and what we see and hear on our social pages. We want to implement it in these international countries, because remember, our approach is not to stand for a religion or to stand for a color or for apartheid. Our approach is to stand for a generation of change, right? And a generation of change is a generation that speaks not only now to our nation, but that speaks to a generation of people. And we not only want our videos to now reach a generation on our international platforms, because not everyone in an international country goes onto these platforms, but we want the networking process to be with one voice, with one approach. And when the networking processes can work hands on with one another, we can help and implement and see the change that is required in our communities, in our schools, in our religions, in our peoples from different generations. And we really see that generation of change that is required. We really see that we do not educate only on our social pages, that this is what we require, but that a nation can now educate on their television screen, that this is where generation now is at. And this is the color approach of generation now. This is what generation now is ready to accept and ready to move forward better. And this is the change that generation now is going to implement on our television screens. So when we switch our television screens on, and we listen to our representative of today, we hear a representative that educates, not only educates now on what they went through, but educates now generation now and where we require generation now to be. And therefore, we need our social media, and we need our televisions, our television networking to be a network of one approach, that we don't only now reach a certain people, but now nations are being educated to be generations, right? Because we don't want to see things like the COVID virus happening in years from now. We need nations to be educated, to be ready to be generations of people. We need nations to now not want to look at Nelson Mandela and want to say that this was our activist those years, but we need people to say this is generation now that is ready to be generations of change. We need to accept that approach. We need to accept that this is what we are ready for, and we need to educate it right. We don't need to educate that this is what happened in history. We need to educate that this is the generation now approach. We are generation of color. We are generation that include. We are generation that protects, and a generation that respects one another. And that is where we need our television and our social networks to take hands with this approach, with saying that we're not a nation of people that went through apartheid, but that we are a generation of people that cares for one another, that cares for where we are, that cares for what we went through, and that respects where we are headed. And therefore, our ways of including this change when it goes to our employment levels, when it goes to our school levels, when it goes to our young children, we include by educating them with where we are at. When everyone understands where we are at, then no one would walk in their own way. Then no one would be a hinder to someone else, because we as a generation understand where this generation is at. We don't understand where a certain nation is at, but we understand as a generation we are prospering, and as a generation we are ready to prosper. So we educate that not only on our social pages when you tune in, we educate it on our television screens, and we implement it in our schools, we implement it in our workplaces, so that when you see someone that is different, you don't have to fear, and you don't have to allow any barriers, but you allow to accept and to respect and to protect. You allow to accept, to respect, and to protect. So generation of now, our education approach is we take hands with what we do, and we allow ourselves and others to respect, to protect, and to accept. So when our young children go to school, they don't continue to educate to exclude, they educate to respect, to protect, and to accept. They don't educate to close the door for someone, but they educate to take hands in prospering, because that is where we are required to be. That is why everyone is in the school classroom. That is why children of different color, different nationality are all in one classroom, to include and not exclude, to have an open door process and not a closed door process. We don't educate our children to be scared of one another. We don't educate on our television screens to be scared of different people with different color, but we educate our people to accept, to respect, and to continue to protect one another. That is generation of now. We implement that process in our schools. We implement that process in our leadership in governments. We implement that process on our social media pages. We implement that process in our television screen, on our television screens. We implement that process in our communities, and we implement it in our ground floor networking with one another, whether it's in our families, whether it's in our households. That is generations now prospering opportunity. And it's either we're going to accept and respect where we are at and move forward with taking hands, and we are going to find ourselves in a better space next year. And we're going to say that we don't look at one another with the differences anymore, but we respect the generation now is ready to prosper. And everyone taking hands with generation now prospering is every individual that will be continuing to prosper. And that is where we want to see us in future. We want to see our generation in future. We want to see our generation with where they are at tomorrow. And we want to see a generation that represents unique. We want to see a generation that represents difference and that speaks up for difference, that educates for difference, and that stands their grounds with prospering. We don't want to exclude. We don't want to abuse anymore. We don't want to hate one another. So we educate with what is required. That is our approach this year. That is our strength for this year. That is our color approach, with our color representing with color in 2022. That is our approach with representing and accepting our unique operation this season, our strongest season, and us required to prosper with the season. Because remember, the seasons are changing regularly, but you need to be on board with the season. You can only be on board with the season if you are respecting where you are at and you are ready to prosper with where you are at. We don't want you to go and focus on judging someone else. We don't want you to go and focus on judging what other people went through years ago, but we want you to prosper with generation now. We want everyone to take hands with that one approach, with saying that this generation is ready to prosper. It's either you are with this generation or you are still stuck in 1992. It's either you are with generation now prospering or you are still stuck in history. It's either you are with generation of color or you are still with white and black. It's either you are with generation of change or you are with your different religion. It's either you are with generation of inclusion or you are with generation of excluding. So only we can decide on where we are this year, and where we are with moving forward, and where we are with how we see other people. When you walk in your community, when you see a person from a different color, when you see a person from a different nation, it's either you are going to continue to respect that person and to greet that person when you see them, or you're going to throw a silent eye and you're still going to be in 1992. So it's either you see that person from Africa in your community, you see them there, and you are still continue to prosper. You are still to continue to educate them that we still want respect in our community, that we have accepted you in our community, but we are ready to prosper. Are you ready to prosper with us? You are not going to see someone from Africa and then you are going to judge them, but you are going to respect them for being a fellow human being on earth. You are not going to see someone from a different religion and then you're going to close your door for them because they have all got scarves on, but you are going to greet them with all respect. That is a generation that is ready to prosper, and only we can make that decision. No one can decide for us if we are ready to prosper. No one can allow you to prosper if you are not ready. No one can force you to greet someone in your community. Only you can tell yourself and you can educate that, you know what, I'm ready to prosper with where I'm at, with what I'm required to do. And that is our approach with color generation now. It is we do not differentiate. It is how do we educate. It is we do not speak of black and white, but we speak of a generation of people. We speak of a fellow human being. It is we do not exclude and educate fear. We do not educate hatred. We do not continue to educate apartheid. We do not continue to educate exclusion, but we continue to educate a prospering generation. And we stand our ground with continuing to educate for a prospering generation. That is generation now. And it's either everyone is going to be on board with taking hands in this approach, or we're still gonna find ourselves next year fighting battles that happened many years ago. It's either we find ourselves in a better space, or we find ourselves in 1993 where we are still fighting things that we did not know what happened. We did not know where it went wrong. We did not know why people educated that way. But the only thing we as a generation can do is we accept where we are now, and we prosper with being a better nation, a better generation. That is our main approach with Color 2022. We continue with this discussion every month with ways that we can include and make sure that we understand the foundation of a community of people, that we know that how do we define a community of people? How do we not speak of people from a different color, of people from a different generation? How do we not continue to judge one another, but how do we respect? We're defining that a community of people is a people that cares and that can nurture one another, that can nurture someone else's child. When someone else's child enters your country, you don't go and judge their child for being a different color, but you respect and you protect their child by being a community that cares for one another. As a nation today, I really respect the New Zealand generation, because what I've learned in the New Zealand nation is that we are nations and nations of people. We are people from different walks of the world, but in this country, we all take hands with respecting one another. In this country, we all take hands when we see one another. We respect one another. We accept one another. We greet one another with all empathy and care. And that is where we need generation now to be at. We need generation now to have matured with understanding what a community of people is, and how to value a community of people, how to not block out one another, but how to value one another with understanding that we have all been meant to be here, and therefore we represent a generation of change. And therefore we represent a generation who has the power to see difference and to stand for difference. We advocate a generation that has the power to know that although change is uncertain, although change can bring fear, although change can sometimes bring anxiety, but we respect change with understanding what is required of us when we see change. What is our advantages required when we see that there's a generation of change required? There's a generation for opportunities that are equal for everyone. There's a generation for opportunities that are ready to excel and to prosper. And there's a generation that gives birth to something brighter, to something better. And that is our advantages of this generation. Yes, we are a generation of change. Yes, change can sometimes bring uncertainty. Yes, change can sometimes bring fear. But when you see the generation changing, you need to be ready to understand what is the advantages, and you walk with the advantages of what is required of you for this generation of now. Because knowing our advantages is having our firm foundation where everyone is ready to be on that platform, and where everyone on that platform is ready to prosper. You're not only on that platform because of yourself, you're not only on that platform because of your financial situation, but you are on that platform taking hands for everyone to prosper with you. That is our approach with color this year. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Yes, I had a lot to say, and I thank everyone who has waved on us today and who has really tuned in and listened to our discussion. But this is our approach when we move forward. We're gonna continue on this discussion every month, where we would find ourselves bettering not only ourselves, but advocating for change, advocating for better, advocating to prosper. Are we ready to prosper? Are we there yet? Are we winning in this season? Are we educating a winning generation? That is generation now. That is our color approach. We're not gonna educate when we look on our television screens that this is black and this is white. We're gonna educate that this is generation now. We're gonna educate this is a generation to prosper. This is a generation that respects to one another, and this is a generation that prospers together. That is where we are this season. We don't need anyone to be anywhere else. We don't need you to educate anything else, but we would be there prospering with everyone who is ready to prosper. We don't need you to fight battles of what happened in years ago, but we need you to be in generation now, because generation now is ready to prosper. Be ready, be on the train to prosper, because we are headed for betterness. We are headed for the stronger us. We are headed for the difference required in our generation. I call our generation era to one. They say it's the 21st century. I call our generation that we are a unique operation of our own. We are a unique generation of our own. We are a unique generation that stands for change. Yes, we were challenged a lot, but yes, we are ready to move forward. Yes, we knew what happened in 2021, but yes, we are ready to move forward. We are ready to take hands. We are ready to prosper, and we are ready to be where we are required to be. We are not going to say that we separated because we stay in different countries. We are going to say that we take hands because we are a generation of era to one, and that is a generation of now. We don't need you to be generation of 1993. Yes, we have been educated of what we went through. We don't need you to say that you are generation of a different religion, but we need you to say that I am generation now, generation of what is required in 2022, and I am ready to represent with being there 100% me, with being there the difference in color, with understanding how I speak, with understanding how I step out, with understanding what I do, and with understanding where I see myself when I walk forward tomorrow. What is it that I need to see change in my community? How is it that I can be the change in my community? And how is it that I can help my community to prosper with being the matured community of people? Thank you everyone for tuning. We respect everyone out there. We thank everyone who tuned into our pages last year, and we are ready to continue to advocate and to stand for what is right. Thank you, my people of all my friends out there. I respect every one of y'all who's always ready to take hands with me in this approach. And in our next session, yes, we actually are going to have $100 voucher, and I have actually prepared the voucher for this month. So by the end of this month, I'm really going to have a session, and I'm going to have $100 voucher that is about 1,000 South African rand. And someone, really one of my loyal people, would really be winning that voucher. And those are our people who tuned in last year and who really stand firm with us during this season, because this is why we are where we are at this time and this year. So so the end of this month, I will tune in and we will have our voucher for representing color award, and I would want to have quarterly vouchers. So this month, everyone who tuned in last year, I would have y'all's names in a box. Everyone who were in the live rooms and who listened into the live streaming rooms, I would have y'all's names and we would draw that winner. And yes, I know all of y'all who tuned in, and yes, so y'all's names would all be there, and we will shuffle the box, and then we are ready to choose that person who really deserves to win that 1,000 rand by the end of this month, January. I will definitely do that. I have prepared the voucher already, and I have already set aside. So yes, I am ready, and thank you for being ready to walk this road with us. That is where we are in generation 2022, ready to prosper and ready to bless one another. That is us now. Thank you for tuning. Thank you, Auntie Zeti and Auntie Zelda and Nadia. Thank you, everyone. Yes, Nadia is one of our new people. Nadia is from our Instagram page. Thank you, Sis Nadia, for listening into this one and for tuning into our discussion. And yes, continue to listen and continue to tune in and continue to be there. We are 100% there for one another, and now our situations are already changing. And yes, our situation are we are already in a better mindset. Our countries are already in a better state, and continue to really be vigilant with where we are at, and continue to really be vigilant with where we go during these times until we really find ourselves fine to be able to move and commute with where we are required to be. And then also, just to mention, I also had a time during the season where I really had the opportunity to be slow to be at places. So if people invite you to places, don't be fast to go out and don't be fast to go to be amongst people, but really allow everyone in the season to be in a better space by really allowing ourselves that time to still step aside and to still be in our own spaces until everything is fine in our communities and with what we have been challenged with. Because yes, we are going to be better, and there's going to be no sign of this virus anymore. I know that. And when I know things, I just know things. And we are going to find ourselves in a better space. So let's just continue to respect one another, and let's not point fingers, but let's really allow ourselves to be better during the season. God bless you. Have a blessed day. Thank you, everyone, for tuning. God bless you.